The ritual calls for 100 sacrifices, but after reading it carefully you realize that it never specified they had to be human. Deciding to be the smartass that you are, you got a petri dish full of bacteria and sacrificed them instead. Story 1. Sacrifice is power. The most powerful sacrifice is life. This is a universal constant of magic. The greater the magic to be performed, the greater the sacrifice to be made. Understanding Basic Magic, Vol 1. Master, there are too many injured and just not enough life to heal them all. The wizards are passing out. Some of them are even dying. What are we going to do? My young apprentice Howard begged of me. He was 25 years old but looked to be in his 60s. We sacrifice part of our life when we do magic. A week here. A month there. A year over here. We wizards may burn brightly but we do not burn for long. I inspected the wound of my patient. A sword slice through 2 lobes of his lung, broken ribs, liver damage, massive blood loss. I tally up the injuries. It would cost me 10 years of my life to heal him completely. It would cost me 2 years to heal him enough that he would survive. I prepare myself and sacrifice 2 years and let the magic course through me, shaping it, directing it, molding it to my will. And then I release it into the patient. I collapse to my knees panting for breath. I have given up 20 years of life today. Almost 60 years worth since this damn war started. But today has seen the fiercest fighting yet. Our king is trying to push through the enemy lines even if it means burning out all of his wizards. Give me a moment, Howard, I say as he helps me to seat. I take a few deep breaths. How many more have come in? I ask shakily. About 100 more, he says quietly. The offensive is not going well. Are there any new prisoners that can be sacrificed? I ask hopefully. The enemy fights until death, and if they can't fight anymore they take a poison capsule and kill themselves. They won't let themselves be taken. I raise an eyebrow at that. That is a new tactic, I say simply. Howard shrugs. They die on the field or we capture them and put them to death to heal our injured. Either way they die, he says, at least this way they aren't helping the enemy. It is smart. Wizard. I need a wizard. A courtier yells as he hauls in a member of the royal court. Howard and I go over to him. It is the prince. His wound is infected. We quickly lay him down on a cot. When did he get wounded? We haven't seen him through here in weeks, I say to the courtier. The prince is aware of the cost of a healing and would not ask it for such a minor wound. He would sacrifice his own life force to heal it, but it isn't allowed to sacrifice noble life for magic, so he decided to let it heal on its own, the courtier said. That is noble of him, but a clean wound of this size would take a day of sacrifice. Now that it is infected it is going to take a great deal more, Howard said sadly as he looked at the grotesque wound. It was oozing pus and the skin next to the opening was necrotic. I probed the wound gently, causing the unconscious prince to moan. The wound was deep. I tallied up the work that would need to be done. At least a year worth of life. Damn. There is so much infection, I said to myself. It is too bad infection wasn't alive, the courtier said. Oh, infection is alive. Thousands and thousands of tiny organisms that are feeding off of our prince and making him sick, I said absently as I cleaned up the wound. Can you sacrifice the tiny organisms? The courtier asked. I looked at Howard. He shrugged his shoulders. I don't remember any text ever saying it had to be human life that must be sacrificed. It was always just implied. Well, if nothing else, sacrificing the infection would clean up the wound, even if there isn't enough life there to heal it, I said, trying to convince myself of the merits. Why not? We should at least try it, Howard said excitedly. I pulled up a chair to the prince's cot. I took a couple of deep breaths and then reached out with my senses to find all of the infection and the microbes that shouldn't be there. It felt like it took an eternity. I had to identify each and every one separately. I took a steadying breath and sacrificed those lives entirely. Not minutes or hours or days, but extinguished those lives entirely. I expected a little bit of power, but I was overwhelmed. The power burned through me, setting every nerve ending on fire and making me ache to the very core of my being. I shaped the power to heal the prince, but there was so much more and there was nowhere for it to go. I started to panic. There was no more hurt on the prince and I wasn't in contact with anyone else that needed healing. The power burned and struggled, it wanted to be free. I clamped down on that power and forced my will on it and then swallowed it whole. My very soul felt like it was on fire. Then the world went black. Master. Master. Are you all right? I heard Howard's voice through the darkness. I opened my eyes. I am still here, young man, I said to Howard. The healed prince looked down at me on the floor. Then to Howard, then to me. You look a lot younger than him, the prince said. I touched my face. The wrinkles were gone. I moved my legs experientially. No aches or pains. How old do I look, Howard? I asked cautiously. If I had to guess, I would say about 16 or 17, Master, Howard said with a big smile. Send a runner. Every one of them we can find. We need everything they can find that is rotting, foodstuffs, horse manure, people with infections, yeast. All of it, any of it. We are going to turn the tide of the war, my boy. Story 2. Day 0, the tome finally showed up today. It was found in a mass grave, just outside of what is now Rome, preserved perfectly. Archaeologists thought it was an early Christian religious text at first, but more careful consideration revealed some peculiar details, Proto-Germanic text hundreds of miles from that region. They've sent it to us for some analysis. First up, carbon dating. Day 25, the first dating finished up last week and the whole lab was shocked. It was at least 500 years older than it should have been. Paper isn't supposed to hold up for that long, nothing traveled that far back in those days without a record, and the dialect is somehow subtly wrong. We're running it again and the linguistics team is doing a retranslation. Oh yeah, we've got a linguistics team now. The university got funding from an anonymous donor, explicitly for this project. Weird part is, we haven't publicized anything about it yet. Still, gift horse, mouth, and all that jazz. Day 70, more money, more team members, more shocking discoveries. Carbon dating reconfirmed that weird date and somebody found a reference to a similar book in some nearly forgotten archive. Didn't say what it was, but we've got one confirmed sighting at the right time, so that's good news. Linguistics team is having a blast. Apparently it's not Proto-Germanic, but some new language that predates it. Similar enough at first glance, but the original read as a religious text seems wrong now. It does reference biblical concepts quite often, however. Lots on Lucifer and the devil. Newest team is a few materials scientists. Apparently, it's not printed on paper. Some kind of animal skin. Day 107, we're getting shut down soon. Lots of 3 letters and men in black started becoming very interested in what we were doing, and now everything will be gone soon. It doesn't make any sense. The book was just some grimoire filled with gibberish rituals and spells. Why would the government care? They've got enough demons without summoning more. They can't even legally keep it. Matt's team got some results and it's a piece of anthropodermic bibliopegy, human skin-bound books. We were supposed to send it back to Italy, since it's a cultural artifact now, but we just needed a few more days to finish translating. They should be receiving a fake any day now. They don't deserve it. It's ours to study. Day 234, all the data's been stolen from me. They swept the lab, top to bottom, then took the server racks whole. They didn't search quite well enough. I made another copy. I let them have it, but I've got the book. It's mine. They can't take it from me. It was translated just before we got disbanded. All the other professors got transferred. Supposedly at new universities, but I know the truth. They betrayed me. They tried to take the book away. They can't do that. It's mine. They tried to steal my book and go work on it themselves. They failed. I've got the rituals here. Fascinating, really. Chemical reagents centuries ahead of their time, impossible processes for back then. And death. Now we know why it was found in a mass grave. Whoever had it before me tried to use it and failed. I won't. I'm better. I can get everything I need on Amazon. Gun cotton, quicksilver, aluminum, even lives. I'll use bacteria. There's thousands in a single colony. I can summon him 100 times over. I've got it all prepared. Set the ritual, sacrifice the lives, and fulfill my purpose. It needs to be done. It has to. I need to. Selected research notes of Simon King. Extracted from Destroyed Residence After Large Explosion by Project Mephistopheles. Story 3. The summoning had failed. The dwarf Himar shrugged and issued a sound of frustrated boredom. I don't know what you thought you'd get, laddie, they're just small UNS, if they be even they're like yeses. What could they possibly do for us? The young mage Arceus stood silent still though. Everything in the books indicated that this should have succeeded. The discovery of these cells was new, and much about them was still not understood, but his refraction spell had allowed him to see the cells on the plate and count them. There were plenty for his purpose, and he had modified the summoning spell to account for the new sacrifice source. This should have worked. We should be seeing a demon here. Himar raised an eyebrow. We really are be desperate then, eh? I wouldn't have thought it to you to take up that kind of summons. You know, you might could warn me before summoning one of those? I thought ya were just carrying some basic hurt upon them out there, and he gestured towards the door. They were locked in a closet in a castle keep. Arceus and Himar were two remnants of the broken and fleeing army of the Faer. The revolution had been burning, simmering for years, but until 10 years ago it had been largely ignored by the mages, merchants, and other powerful members of the Faeran League, an alliance of might, magic, and money which, in spite of shifting allegiance and the rare upheaval among the upper echelons, had kept peace in the world for almost a millennium. There had always been voices dissatisfied with how that alliance ruled though, who believed that the relative peace of the League brought with it a stability which was also a cage upon the creative energy of humanity. Concessions had been made in the last 50 years. The establishment of a society of rational observation, dedicated to discovering the mundane truths of the world for the purpose of furthering the ability of the non-magical peoples to help themselves in the absence of magic users. The change was hotly debated, and for decades after its first proposal, generally ignored, but as word spread among the lower echelons that such a thing might even be feasible, it became necessary for the three councils to acknowledge the demand. 5 years ago, the explosion at the Prime capital of Ars Malius had changed everything. The entire council, the entire Prime capital, and the entire surrounding countryside, was vaporized in an instant. You know, I've never said this to anyone, but I tell you, Malvina was right, and I believe that's what caused the explosion, and if I could just use it to cast this spell, we could summon a demon powerful enough to destroy the entire rebellion. I dainty know who Malvina is, but let's get a thing straight, you could cast this spell, I want nothing and no part of what ya do here. Come now, I think it's time we acknowledge we've been beat. Maybe this new world of theirs won't be so bad. I know that sounds barmy coming from me, but I know when I'm beat, and we're beat, so what's the use in fighting it? Some dwarf you are, where's your stubborn dash? Himar punched him in the shoulder. Don't be that way, that's a sham notion and ya know it. Haven't ya known me long enough to know better? Come on. Just cast some kind o' common spell to make sure they actually capture us instead o' just murdering us on the spot, and let's get out there. Arceus looked down at his last desperate attempt at resistance and muttered, I know it would sound crazy, but I swear Malvina was right. I swear her experiment caused the explosion. A minute later, they stepped out of the closet and into a dining hall full of rabble and celebration. It took a minute for one of the revelers to realize that the odd pair who stepped out of the closet was of a different cut. The dwarf with the general's insignia put down his drink and said, hold it, that's a magus. I mean, they look to be surrendering, so I guess we'd better. You know, take 'em in. Maria, see if you can figure out where they were hiding, there might be more. Maria heard the order and stopped dancing, and put her drink down, inspecting the closet door Arceus and Himar had just emerged from. Was there always a closet door here? The general inspected it briefly too, and said, looks like a concealment spell. Gads, if they'd had any artifacts with any power in there, they could have really done us in. Someone stop the music, we need to check the rest of the keep for hidden doors before we can let down our guard. Maria looked closer at the table in the closet, looks like they were attempting some sort of spell. Thankfully they didn't have the strength to complete it though, looks like. I only know a little of the language of magic, but it looks like maybe a summon? Not sure what of though? The general blew on the circle of dust, creating a light show in miniature as the dust sparkled in the light from outside the closet. Well, it ain't going to get summoned now, whatever it was. The revelry continued into the night. After the castle had been checked for secret doors, 2 more hidden groups were discovered. One put up a fight, the other surrendered peaceably. The League had finally fallen. The dream of a century of labor and struggle had finally been realized, and the magic of the world could now be put to use for the benefit of all rather than to keep afloat an oppressive alliance of all the great powers used to hold one people in the control of another. It was a time of great celebration throughout the land, unless, of course, you happened to be a loyalist magi, a member of the Society of Capital, or a member of the Elodian Society. There was admittedly some excess in the process of correcting the imbalances of the world. Magi who had done no wrong were punished at times simply for being magi, and in areas which had suffered particularly harshly at the hands of the old League, the new Council of Citizens was hard-pressed to protect them and keep the peace. Redistribution of the productive implements of society sometimes took the form of punitive retribution against those implements' former owners, and again, the council was sometimes unable to prevent these acts of retribution. And the last spark of loyalist resistance was not fully extinguished for another year. In the region of Amaran, loyalist magi managed to condemn a whole crop to failure, and they, along with all the former members of the region's local society of capital, were gruesomely murdered and eaten that winter. The new Council of Citizens' greatest problem, though, came about slowly, insidiously. 2 months after the victory celebration and the raising of the citizens' banner over the stronghold of the capital Secundus, which had become de facto the prime capital after the Great Explosion, a malady became known in the capital. It began slowly, as a shortness of breath, but without a cough or any other symptoms. As it progressed, the shortness of breath worsened, and a few months after first noticing the shortness of breath, their eyes would begin to turn yellow and bloodshot. 2 months in, there were 12 afflicted, including Maria and her commanding officer, and a number of prisoners of war. 4 months later, it was known to be spreading quickly through the prison camp, in a single massive wave, but through what mechanism none could say. It wasn't until 6 months after victory, though, that the first great wave of affliction was noticed by the non-prisoner population. The council began isolating those afflicted in the hopes of inhibiting its spread, but by the end of the year, they realized they had begun the isolation measure far too late. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more, YouTube thinks you might like these videos.